The elegant structure of Oracle Arena gleamed under the night sky of San Francisco, its lights cutting against the darkness like a beacon of expectations. Inside, the characteristic perfume of gala events, a mixture of polished wood, expensive fragrances, and that almost palpable tension of sporting greatness, filled the environment. The 3,500 lights suspended from the ceiling created a golden glow that bathed the expectant faces in the audience, reflecting on the metallic surfaces of the trophies strategically positioned on the main stage. Steph Curry breathed deeply, feeling the soft fabric of his navy blue suit against his skin as he adjusted his bow tie for the third time. The cold silk slid between his fingers that had thrown countless balls through countless baskets, fingers that now trembled almost imperceptibly. Beside him, Ayesha was resplendent in a golden dress that captured and returned light like thousands of tiny stars. The slight aroma of her jasmine perfume, the same one she had worn on their wedding day, brought him a calmness that contradicted the inner storm he felt growing. "Nervous?" she asked softly, her voice almost lost in the buzz of the elegantly dressed crowd that filled the auditorium. "Not for the reasons they imagine," Steph replied, with that half-smile that sports photographers had captured thousands of times throughout his career. His eyes scanned the crowd, recognizing familiar faces, current and past teammates, league executives, celebrities who had made basketball part of their public persona. All there for another night of recognition, another ceremony that would follow the predictable and comfortable script of sports awards. But tonight would be different. The decision had been made hours earlier, in the private silence of the black limousine that had transported them from the mansion in Atherton to Oracle Arena. Ayesha had squeezed his hand and simply said, "Do what your heart tells you." Around him, the aroma of expectations mingled with subtle notes of expensive champagne and exclusive perfumes. The sparkle of jewelry captured and refracted the ambient lights, creating small particular constellations on necks and wrists. The murmur of conversations, that characteristic sound of hundreds of simultaneous interactions, created a sonic texture that Steph had learned to associate with moments of public celebration. The ceremony presenter took the stage, his amplified voice echoing through the perfectly designed acoustic space, initiating the choreographed sequence of recognitions and thanks that preceded the main announcement. Steph felt Ayesha's hand find his, her fingers intertwining with the familiarity of someone who had shared every triumph and every disappointment over more than a decade. And the winner of this season's MVP award is Steph Curry, the presenter finally announced, his voice rising to create the moment of climax. The explosion of applause that followed created an almost physical sound wave, reverberating off the walls and enveloping Steph like a rising tide. He smiled, that automatic smile that years of public exposure had perfected, and embraced Ayesha, feeling the accelerated beating of her heart against his chest. He kissed her forehead, a gesture so habitual between them that many fans already considered it a kind of talisman. "This is the moment," he whispered in her ear, words inaudible to anyone else in that packed space. Ayesha merely nodded, her eyes expressing everything that words could not adequately capture: support, love, understanding of the magnitude of what was about to happen. As he walked toward the stage, his steps lightly resonating on the wooden floor, Steph felt the weight of gazes, the heat of the intensified lights now focused exclusively on him. Camera flashes created a stroboscopic storm that seemed to fragment time into frozen instants. The weight of the moment, not just the award, but the decision he had made, pressed on his shoulders like an invisible mantle. Upon reaching the microphone, the cold metal under his fingers contrasted with the warmth he felt rising up his neck. He adjusted it slightly and contemplated the sea of expectant faces. Up close, he could see the detailed texture of expectation, polite smiles, attentive gazes, the particular sparkle of camera lenses transmitting that moment to millions of viewers. "Thank you. Thank you all." His voice sounded clear, through the sound system, resonating with that characteristic mixture of confidence and humility that had become part of his public persona. "I want to thank my teammates, the Golden State Warriors organization, the coaches who have shaped me over the years." The words came out automatically, as if they were printed on some invisible card in front of him. The unwritten but implicitly understood script of award ceremonies. Sports journalists in the corners of the room typed on their devices, without much enthusiasm, evidencing that for them, this was just another speech among many. A few more quotes to complete articles already partially written. But tonight? Steph paused, feeling his throat tighten slightly, the weight of the unsaid momentarily oppressive. "Tonight, I cannot just follow the usual script." The buzz gradually diminished, like a wave receding from the beach. Steph saw league executives exchanging curious glances, felt the almost imperceptible change in the quality of attention being paid to him. Pens that had been distractedly scribbling notes were now motionless. Eyes that had occasionally wandered around the auditorium now fixed entirely on him. Many of you know Ayesha as a talented chef, entrepreneur, dedicated mother, and my biggest supporter. What you don't know is how much she has really contributed to the player I am today. In the front row, Ayesha maintained that elegant and controlled posture she had perfected over the years. But Steph could see, as only someone who truly loved could see, the slight tremor in her lower lip, the way her fingers tightened around the small golden purse in her lap, the subtly accelerated breathing that raised and lowered her diamond necklace. When I met Ayesha, I was just a boy with a dream and empty pockets. Steph felt a genuine smile form on his lips with the memory, different from the choreographed smile he used for cameras. I remember the smell of wax and wood in that church in Charlotte where we met, the sound of hymns still echoing off the walls as we talked for the first time. I was wearing sneakers with a discreet hole in the side that I tried to hide at all costs. She pretended not to notice, but years later she confessed to me that it was exactly those worn sneakers that made her fall in love. The proof that I was so focused on my dreams that I barely noticed the wear and tear along the way. A soft murmur ran through the audience. It wasn't the kind of intimate detail that was usually shared at these polished and choreographed events. In the front rows, representatives from Nike, his longtime sponsor, exchanged surprised glances, probably not expecting one of their biggest stars to mention a worn-out sneaker in a formal speech. She believed in me when my name meant nothing, when scouts from major universities passed right by me, when my body was too thin seemed to disqualify me before I could even prove my worth. Steph paused, looking directly at Ayesha, allowing himself to momentarily dive into the memory of those days, the bitter taste of rejection, the cutting sound of discreet laughter when he entered gymnasiums dominated by physically more impressive athletes, the smell of cheap disinfectant in the locker rooms where he often sat alone, fighting against the doubts that threatened to consume him. There is something profoundly humiliating about being constantly underestimated. The silent pain of entering a gymnasium and feeling the gazes that say, "This one doesn't belong here." Some of you know that feeling. It's like rough sand inside your shirt, irritating with every movement, It's the metallic taste of anticipated failure. It's the sound of doors closing before you even reach the handle. The lights now seem to illuminate not just his body, but expose every vulnerability he had carefully guarded over the years. Still, there was something liberating about it, like taking off a mask he had worn for so long that he had almost forgotten the face underneath it. Ayesha didn't just say I belonged. She showed, with daily actions, that she believed it more than I did myself. And I'm not just talking about emotional support, although that was fundamental. I'm talking about concrete, technical, and strategic contributions that no one outside our most intimate circle has ever known. Steph breathed deeply, feeling the cold air conditioning fill his lungs, contrasting with the growing heat he felt under the intense lights. During our early years together, when I was still struggling to establish myself in the league, Ayesha sacrificed her own ambitions countless times. But what nobody knows is how much of her is present in every technical aspect of my game. Steph then related how Ayesha spent nights studying sports nutrition specific to optimizing performance in shooters, when they couldn't afford to hire specialists. He described how she had created a personalized food system by studying his individual blood, chemistry, how she developed sleep protocols based on research she did while he rested, how her technical observations, methodically recorded in notebooks she kept away from public eyes, often revealed patterns that not even experienced coaches had noticed. In 2013, when I suffered those ankle injuries that threatened my career, doctors recommended a traditional recovery path. It was Ayesha who researched alternatives, diving into recent scientific studies, consulting specialists in 5 different states until finding a completely different approach. Steph paused, allowing the weight of that revelation to settle over the audience. In the area reserved for the Warriors' medical team, surprised faces exchanged significant glances. I vividly remember those weeks, the smell of mentholated ointments that permeated our bedroom, the rhythmic sound of the ice machine she installed beside the bed, the texture of the specific exercises she developed, combining knowledge from yoga, ballet, and traditional rehabilitation. The bitter taste of the natural anti-inflammatory supplements she researched and personally prepared, each adjusted for a specific stage of recovery. The team's official records attributed his extraordinary recovery to personal resilience and the quality of the medical team. Now, for the first time, Steph revealed the complete truth behind that story that had been fundamental to his subsequent trajectory. In 2016, after that finals defeat that still hurts like a wound not completely healed, I broke. Literally broke. Steph's voice faltered slightly, exposing a vulnerability he rarely allowed himself to show publicly. It was one of those dark nights that few see in the trajectory of a professional athlete. The hotel room in Cleveland smelled of industrial disinfectant and hopelessness. I was sitting on the floor, my back against the bed, surrounded by the shards of a vase I had thrown against the wall in a moment I'm not proud of. The silence in the room was absolute now. This was not the Steph Curry the world knew, controlled, almost stoic in his serene determination. It was a much more human, imperfect, vulnerable version. Ayesha didn't say a word. She simply sat on the floor with me, among the shards, and held my hand for almost an hour. The only sound was the buzzing of the old air conditioner and my irregular breathing. When I finally said that perhaps I should completely change my style of play, that perhaps my approach was fundamentally wrong, she silently stood up. Steph smiled at the memory while observing silent tears running down Ayesha's face in the front row. I expected comfort, perhaps platitudes, about how everything would be okay. Instead, she opened the laptop and showed me a detailed statistical analysis she had compiled during the entire season. Data that proved, without a shadow of doubt, that my style of play was not the problem. She had spent months studying patterns that not even I knew existed in my own game. The league executives and sports analysts present leaned almost imperceptibly forward in their chairs. This was a revelation that went beyond the personal. It entered professional territory in a way that challenged established narratives about athletic development. Have you ever felt completely seen by someone? Not just loved or supported, but truly seen at a level that not even you can see yourself? That night in Cleveland, among ceramic, shards, and seemingly broken dreams, Ayesha saw me with a clarity that changed the course of my career. In the audience, faces that normally maintained professional composure at public events now showed genuine emotion. Steph could see tears in the eyes of veteran players, men who understood the invisible emotional cost of professional sports, the internal battles that never reached television broadcasts. In 2019, when we were developing new movement patterns for my off-ball game, Ayesha was the one who suggested I study professional dancers to improve my movement efficiency. She organized sessions with a former dancer from the San Francisco Ballet, which transformed my understanding of body mechanics and energy conservation. Steph continued revealing details that had never been shared publicly. How Ayesha had studied ballet for months to help him understand principles of fluid movement and force generation from seemingly unstable positions. How she had transformed the family garage into a performance laboratory during the pandemic. How she had developed innovative training systems based on research she did during the hours when he slept. The warm-up routine you see me do before games, the one that became a trademark and that children all over the world try to replicate? Ayesha developed it, studying techniques used by Olympic shooters and performance artists. Each movement, each sequence, was meticulously planned to create the perfect mental trigger for my performance. The camera flashes intensified when Steph revealed details about the extraordinary recovery after his hand fracture in 2020. How Ayesha had created specific exercises based on techniques used by pianists and surgeons. How she had insisted on approaches that contradicted traditional medical consensus. The anti-inflammatory diet system that revolutionized my recovery between games. It didn't come from our team nutritionists. Ayesha developed it after spending months researching advanced scientific literature on athletic metabolism and functional medicine. She tested dozens of variations in our meals until finding the perfect balance between performance and flavor. The nights she stayed awake until 3 in the morning, adjusting recipes and researching new ingredients while I slept, are countless. The most surprising revelation, however, was yet to come. 2 years ago, I faced something that very few people know about. A series of problems with my peripheral vision that we kept completely private. Steph paused, noting the genuine surprise on the faces of league executives and even his teammates. The doctors were clear about the limitations I would likely face. For a player whose greatest strength had always been spatial perception and the ability to visually process the game quickly, it was devastating. The silence in the arena was so deep that the slight buzz of the ventilation system seemed deafening. The revelation of a visual problem not disclosed publicly was significant. The kind of information that could have considerable contractual and financial implications in the world of professional sports. I remember the feeling of the cold paper in the doctor's office under my hands, the antiseptic smell that seemed to permeate not just the environment, but my future. Ayesha was sitting beside me when the doctor explained the likely limitations I would face. I observed her face as he spoke. There wasn't a trace of Defeat. Just that quiet determination I had learned to recognize as her instinctive response to the greatest challenges. Steph then revealed how Ayesha had immersed herself in the study of neuroplasticity, discreetly consulting sensory rehabilitation specialists, creating a revolutionary proprioceptive system that allowed him to compensate for the limitations in a way no one had considered possible. She transformed our basement into a spatial perception laboratory. She developed exercises that seemed crazy at first. She would completely blindfold me and create three-dimensional sound environments to train my ears to do part of the work my eyes could no longer perfectly perform. She spent nights studying how the brain can reconfigure its connections to compensate for sensory deficits. She built tactile feedback systems, small sensors that gave me information about my positioning through touch instead of vision. This was a level of technical detail rarely discussed at award ceremonies. In the seats reserved for sports technology executives, pens furiously scribbled in notebooks. The most incredible thing is that she did all this while managing her own ventures, taking care of our children, and maintaining a perfectly polished public facade. Have you ever noticed how she never talks about these contributions in interviews? How she deflects any question about her influence on my game with polite smiles and generic responses about emotional support. Steph descended from the stage and walked to the front row, where Ayesha remained seated, visibly emotional. The sound of his steps on the wooden floor created a rhythm that seemed to mark the transition to a new chapter. He extended his hand to her. "Please, stand up." After a moment of hesitation, years of conditioning to remain in the background being challenged in that instant, Ayesha stood up, her golden dress catching the light from the spotlights that now moved to include her in the center of view. Attention! The bright fabric seemed almost liquid under the intense lighting, creating a golden aura around her. What I'm trying to say is that this trophy, and every trophy I've ever received, doesn't belong just to me. It's not just a recognition of my work, but of the extraordinary work of a woman most of you know only superficially. Steph then extended the MVP trophy to Ayesha, silently inviting her to hold it with him. That's why I'm sharing this now, not because she asked, because she never would, but because it's time for the world to know that when you applaud Steph Curry, you are applauding an incredible partnership. Because Ayesha Curry is not just the wife of an NBA player, she is an unrecognized visionary who redefined what's possible in elite athletic preparation. A brilliant strategist whose influence is imprinted in every statistic you celebrate in me. The entire audience rose in a spontaneous ovation that reverberated through the walls of the auditorium, creating an almost tangible sound wave. The aroma of genuine emotion, rare in these carefully choreographed events, filled the environment. It was possible to feel the texture of the historic moment unfolding, the almost physical sensation of a paradigm being rewritten in real time. Amid the deafening applause, Steph approached the microphone one last time, his voice carrying an emotion rarely demonstrated publicly. I have one final confession to make. For years, I carried a silent fear that I only shared with Ayesha. The fear that if the world knew how much of her exists in my success, it would somehow diminish my achievements. What a foolish and insecure man I was. He paused, allowing the vulnerability of that admission to reverberate through the space. Today, I understand a profound truth. Acknowledging those who helped us grow doesn't diminish our achievements. It amplifies them, gives them context, honesty, and a human dimension that transcends trophies and statistics. Steph looked directly at the main camera, knowing his words would reach far beyond that auditorium. crossing geographic and cultural distances to touch lives he would never personally know. We live in a world obsessed with narratives of individual success, of innate talents, and isolated genius. But the most beautiful truth I've discovered in my journey is that our greatest victories are always, inevitably, collaborative. They are woven with the invisible threads of relationships that sustain us when we fall, that challenge us when we become complacent, that see possibilities in us that we can't even see ourselves. Silence had returned to the room, each person present absorbing the weight of those words. Steph held Ayesha's hand more firmly, their fingers intertwined as they had been in all the defining moments of their lives together. The birth of their children, championship victories, nights of doubt and fear away from the spotlight. When I was a child, my father told me something I never forgot. He said, "Son, the world will try to convince you that you're special because of what you can do with a basketball. Don't believe it. You're special because of what you can inspire in others, for what you can build with those you love." I spent years trying to fully understand what he meant. Today, I finally understand. The camera showed Del Curry in the audience, uncontained tears running down the normally stoic face of the former NBA player. Beside him, Sonia Curry smiled through her own tears, her face radiant with maternal pride that transcended athletic achievements. So, the next time you see an athlete celebrating a victory, an executive receiving an award, or anyone being recognized for excellence, remember, there is always an untold story of partnership, of hands that sustain, of minds that contribute without seeking the spotlight. And perhaps true greatness isn't in the applause we receive, but in the courage to share the stage with those who helped us get there. The Curry couple left the stage hand in hand, leaving behind a deeply impacted audience. In the days that followed, those words spread far beyond the world of sports, touching something fundamental in the hearts of people from all fields and backgrounds. Perhaps because, in an increasingly polarized and individualistic world, Steph Curry had offered a simple but revolutionary truth: that our success stories are infinitely richer, truer, and more powerful when we include all their authors. And that, in the end, our greatest achievements are not measured by what we accomplish alone, but by what we enable in each other. The speech that no one expected became a catalyst for a national conversation about partnership, recognition, and the true nature of success. More importantly, it opened space for countless other Ayeshas whose extraordinary contributions remained in the shadows, not just in professional sports, but in every field of human endeavor. And as for the Curry couple, that night marked not the end of a journey, but the beginning of a new chapter, one in which Ayesha finally received the recognition she deserved for her brilliance and vision. One in which Steph found a new freedom in complete honesty about the foundations of his success. One in which, together, they redefined what it means to be a true partnership, on the court and in life. As they left the auditorium that historic night, Ayesha's jasmine perfume mingled with the citrus notes of Steph's cologne, creating a unique fragrance that seemed to symbolize their union. Distinct components that, together, created something entirely new and unexpectedly powerful. An olfactory metaphor for the truth they had finally shared with the world, that greatness rarely exists in the singular, that our most significant stories are always, in the end, stories of we, not I.